I'm in Trowbridge and it's raining. This is a 1960s detached house, probably early 1960s, I'm not entirely sure, but it's been underpinned, and I know it has been underpinned. I was forewarned, and I wonder whether I would have noticed, or I would have picked up if I hadn't been told before. In terms of construction, it's fairly conventional. Those brick elevations are about 290mm deep, a little deeper than one would have anticipated at 280mm, but maybe my measuring's not very good. The first floor tiled panel seems to be about 250mm deep, so I expect there is a long concrete lintel over the window with aggregate blockwork over the top of that, and then the tile cladding was applied to that, probably battens off on a damp-proof membrane. And then up the top, that gable is timber framed with some kind of damp-proof membrane behind the tiles, so not much to that part of the house. The little rear extension's 320mm deep. Some bugger with a machine tool behind me, so that suggests it's fairly modern, with enough depth to include some insulation in the wall cavity, and down the bottom some little weep vents to allow any penetrating dampness to get out of the wall. It's the rear elevation that's been underpinned. Trowbridge is built on shrinkable clay soil, at least part of it, the Oxford clay, and over there oak trees with tree preservation orders on them. And you can probably see from this picture there is a different coloured brick below the tile cladding to the front elevation. So you've got light coloured bricks forming that panel there, and the foot of those brick columns to the side elevations have been rebuilt as well. It's the same the other side, that's been rebuilt. The engineer's report suggests that the original foundations will be 0.5 metres below ground level, which seems rather shallow, and the recommendation is that the new foundation should be 1.5 metres deep or deeper if the roots of the tree are below 1.5 metres. So I suppose what this means now is we've got a house with 3 elevations built on 0.5 metre foundations and 1 elevation on 1.5 metre foundations. That conservatory was there before the underpinning took place, so that will have been disturbed. And now we have a little gap between the conservatory and the main house, and there's lots of filling internally too, but the foundation under the conservatory is probably quite shallow compared to the house as well, so it might continue to move. That's the other corner of the house where you can see brickworks being rebuilt. There's quite a lot of asbestos in this property, including this surviving downpipe. The rest of the rainwater pipes are plastic. But you can just about see the top of that's beginning to get a bit flaky and deteriorating, so it would be a good idea, I think, to get rid of that asbestos sooner rather than later. The soffits and the asbestos, the soffits and the undercloak to the verge are also asbestos, and in the porch, that nice stippled effect to the ceiling indicates that's asbestos as well. Another little asbestos panel over the garage door, that's hiding the lintel from view. I'm fairly sure there's a flat roof to the original garage, but there's been an extension and a pitched roof has been built over the top, and they have diligently introduced these metal straps there to fix the roof frame down to the external walls, but in the case of this last one over here, they've forgotten to nail it to the wall, probably because it's a little bit proud and a little bit awkward. Well, if the house has been affected by structural movement, then maybe the drains have too, although we won't be able to know that. There, a lot of benching seems to have broken off, and there's lots of loose material there. There's only one place that can have gone, and that's down the drain, so I think we can assume a certain amount of blocking up at some stage in the random future. And in the conservatory where it joins the house, somebody's stuck an awful lot of filler in there, or whether that was post-underpinning or pre-underpinning, no way of me knowing really, but I suppose need to rake it all out and do it again. This is the rear right corner of the house, or indeed the rear elevation of the house, which has been underpinned, and there's no evidence of a problem here. I mean, this is not the sort of thing you're going to include in a level 2 survey, but I guess on account of all the disturbance that's gone on, a load of dust was created, affecting the aggregate block work, and you've got a little trail of black dust coming down the wall and piling up down here. So again, I don't think you can go including little details like that in a level 2 survey, but it is going to be a nuisance, isn't it? Here's an example of the sort of dilemma that crops up at random from time to time. I mean, I'm doing a survey, so I've got to test the windows. So I habitually test all of them as a general rule. That one opens and closes very nicely. You might want to test a representative sample, I think it's called. Here's my problem though, I've opened this one and the tiles are obstructing it, so I can't close the window. Whose fault's that? I mean, I have to open the window, but I can't close it. Here's the roof. This is a relatively early example of a truss drafter roof, and I'm guessing that it has been assembled on site rather than being a factory produced version, with the joints being glued and nailed. So I guess there's been a guy up here with hammer and nails putting this together, but in principle it's the same thing. Rafters, struts under the rafters, hangers, and the struts and the hangers down there appear to be nailed to the ceiling joists, and then we've got these ceiling joist binders running from front to back. So that's all fairly straightforward. What is a little bit unusual, there seems to be one missing. Anyway, there are these long diagonal timbers here, and they seem to be fixing the gable wall back to the roof structure, so a bit of tying in. There's one there, and well, who cares, but there's one missing to the rear, so there's scope for improvement. But the advantage, I suppose, that a roof with a timber and tile front gable has over a roof with a cavity wall is when you want to retrospectively strengthen it, you can indeed put some metal straps fixing that timber frame onto the roof structure. There is almost an absence of wind bracing. I mean, there are those little braces under the roof ridge, but I wonder whether they were just there to stop the roof toppling over during the construction process. But yes, I mean, comprehensive wind bracing required. Just about visible here, mostly because they're coated in black goo, but there are little collars fitted under the roof ridge as well for a bit of additional strengthening. Why aren't we focusing? There we go. The underlay is of a kind of paper type, which is collapsing quite clearly there, and around the chimney it's decaying. So what do we do about that? I mean, you can't patch repair that, so it'd be a bit drastic, but I think one has to advise the customer they probably need to take all the tiles off, get rid of that underlay, put a modern air permeable underlay in. In fact, there's a lot to do to this roof to modernise it, but the main frame's in fairly good condition. In terms of roof space insulation, they've used the stormy sea approach, where they've chucked heaps of it in there, all over the place, with massive gaps, especially over there. So that needs sorting out. And presently there's no meaningful ventilation. There's lots of accidental ventilation, of course, where the underlay's falling apart. But an air air permeable underlay will sort out most of that, and plenty of scope to put vents in elsewhere. And there's that white stuff there, which is cavity wall insulation, which is in the side elevations, spilling into the roof space in vast quantities. To summarise then, it's a condition rating 2, isn't it? But a fairly big one, so I think they need to take the tile covering off, put an air permeable underlay down, put the tiles back, strap the walls, the gable walls to the roof structure, fully wind brace it, introduce a modern level of ventilation, perhaps over and above just the air permeable underlay, and tidy up the insulation. This is a house built in, I would guess, about 1960, I suppose. It's a little bit of a mid-20th century time warp inside. There's nothing massively wrong with it. You know, when you arrive at a house with reconstituted stone walls, that you're going to find some thermal fracturing, and it's just a case of looking for it. And this house is typical. There is a little bit of cracking between ground floor and first floor window openings. And now I can't see it, but it's there somewhere. There you go, pretty much right up the middle. There is a precast reinforced concrete slab over the front door to keep the rain off your head, or even spillage from the valley above. But the steel reinforcement is corroding, so that looks quite nasty. So I don't know how long that's going to last. There's a sort of recessed side door opening. And up there you've got your obligatory bit of asbestos cement. A nice example of a cut roof. So this is just predating truss rafter roofs, or built in spite of truss rafter roofs, as it's a one-off. Ouch, just bang my head. There it is. Lateral bracing provided by the purlins and by those ceiling joist binders, and by that lump of wood there. I don't know what that's doing there, but it's probably doing something. And we've got struts sitting on blockwork partitions, an arrangement of hangers pinning the roof down and pulling the ceilings up. All fairly good condition. And the underlay is just beginning to fail, but it's still, I think, good enough to patch repair at this stage. Now the roof space insulation is rubbish. What's that, 50mm if it's not 20? But they have bought some more. They've just forgotten. So they've been to Wickes, bought some insulation, and like you do, just forgotten to roll it out. No roof space ventilation. There are vents in the gable walls externally, but I think they're presumably there to ventilate the wall cavity, because they're not ventilating the roof space. That's the valley down there. I don't know whether we can see. Can we see? A little bit of whitening to the underlay, indicating a bit of decay, and it does coincide with just the merest hint of a leak down below. And there is the underside of the valley, with just a hint of discoloration to the ceilings and the walls, which suggests that there has been a bit of damp penetration. I can't see the valley externally because of trees, but the one on the other side looks fine. It's a tiled valley. Lots of indications that condensation has been a problem. Whether this is before it had cavity wall insulation, which it has, or after, I don't know. But even sort of streaming signs there, as if liquid's been running down the wall, which is mildly concerning. But again, I don't know whether this is a historic problem or a recent one. That's really rather lovely, a Rayburn Rhapsody solid fuel stove with the potential to produce hot water. Whether it will survive the onslaught of modernisation, I don't know, but I mean, it should do, because it's quite pretty, I suppose, enigmatic of the 1950s. And there's a bit of redundant plumbing from the solid fuel stove, I guess. And they're the remains, well not the remains, perhaps the total of the original kitchen, which I think is very unlikely to survive modernisation. And outside it's got a coal bunker with a little asbestos cement door. So overall, a nice house, just waiting to be brought back to life.